family, and welcome back to the Explore the Extraordinary podcast. My name is Betty Guadagno, and today I am joined by my dear friend, Rae. And Rae is a holistic health practitioner. She's a peer advocate, and I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today. When I met Rae, we met in a spiritual community together, and we have such parallels in our spiritual journey. And I never thought that I would ever find someone who had so many similarities to me, because of course I think that I'm so unique in my human experience. And then I found somebody who had so many mirrored experiences to me. It was too divine to not connect. And anyway, I'm going to toss it over to Rae so that you can share your experience. And I'm so grateful for your willingness to serve the community. Thanks.
Yeah, Betty, so grateful, so much gratitude for all the events that brought us to be here. It's just, even just talking about that instance of us meeting, I'm brought back like energetically to that like excitement and that like thinning of the veil, right? Because like before, for me, yeah, there was this sort of, oh, like my experience is so my own, and I felt lost in that, like a little bit. And it was such a beautiful like breaking open to experience, and you're such a joyous, like receptive person too, so like to have that dialogue and that experience was awesome. So yeah, there's been this cumulation of things that have brought me to where I am today, and that is just one little snippet of the magic behind it all, right? And so I guess I'll start from where I feel the beginning is, and it started, yeah, like young, right? I always had this heavy but magical awareness of what was going on around me. And even with my parents, I felt like as much as I respected and loved them, there was just this like not being as present as I could have been in my childhood. And so that was great. It was fine, but it also brought, and so because of that, it brought this opportunity for me to develop it on my own and get comfortable with it. And so, I mean, my childhood was a lot of, there was, some abuse that went on, but the peaceful part of it was, right, like I would be able to leave that knowing that, because religion was such a reason, like a thing for people to excuse the bad actions behind, fear of whatever that comes from religion, and being honest and authentic about real experiences. It brought this ability for me to separate from like this rat race, right? But then I grew up a little bit. Like I got into my teen years, and when I was a teen, even before, but like I wanted to like fit in. I wanted to see what the big deal was. It terrified me a little bit because I had older brothers who were more experienced than me, and the reaction that it brought was just really intense, like in my family. And so I like dipped a couple feet in, right? And that lack of guidance, I ended up diving like head first, right? So my experience was I ended up using like some like pretty heavy drugs in the end that like were really intense for me. And there was this one instance where I was just super strung out, and I ended up like making this somatic memory in my body that even after my sobriety, it was such a it was a guide, but it was also such like a heavy guide, right? The somatic memory. And like not only to add on to that, right? The magical experience that I had that got me sober, right? Like I I grew up with a very dear cousin of mine. We were separated by different states and different high schools and schools growing up. But every time we were together, and even when we were apart, it was just this solace that came like into my heart. And just knowing that she was there like made everything better. And you know, like I said, different lives. She got into drugs on her own too. And long story short, she passed away. And my family was like, whoa, that's really intense. She was younger than me. They're like, what are you going to do? Die as well? And so they sent me to go do this psychedelic experience with this medicine called ibogaine. And I like hadn't really, you know, dived into that realm of myself for so long because I had been using such heavy drugs and now it was so unfamiliar. And so she was this guide for me, you know, coming out of that experience and with this heavy somatic memory that I had developed in my right before getting sober, heaviest, like kind of rock bottom area. And so it was just, even in my heaviest moments, right, there was this peace that would come over me, like just this peace and this pink aura, and everything would glow, right? In these moments where I just felt so desperate, like nothing was working. The universe was all, you know, and against me, right? And so like I was able with like this guidance of her and just my future, right? Like just kind of feeling out what that was again, right? Because with drug use, at least in my experience, my intuition had been hijacked so many times by the drug use. And so it was an interesting journey, right? Like coming through that. And the reason I bring up the somatic memory as well is because it's been this onion for me. Like I was very like tight and tense in the beginning of my sobriety, and I had this memory of like sitting in this church right after my cousin's wake, like not in a good way, with my like rehab people, and I was all like tense and twitchy, and they're like, I remember when I was like that. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is a challenge. It's going to be a challenge for me to move past, right? And so it was this like fire within me, and this onion kept unlocking, right? And every time this onion would unlock or unravel or unpeel, right? It was as if this like angst and like this anger was like being like melted away, right? And all of the people that I met along the way were such guides to me in believing that this process was something that could be done, right? For the experience that, you know, we've had, right, that we've shared of right, like people not respecting my space and essentially, you know, creating a break in my ability to ground for years in that sobriety as well. My point is like through all of those experiences, as bizarre and weird and like kind of out of body, right? Like as they loosened myself from this like, oh, the world is happening to me. It's like, no, like this is my soul mission. I'm finding things out from these people, like and feeling these things from these people, because deep down, like I'd experienced these terrible things and then I'd let it go, and like I'd have this major like somatic release. And it was just bizarre because I'd be so angry during it, and I'd you know, and then like all of a sudden it was just gone. And I was like, was this really meant to happen? Right? for me personally, right? And I believe it could have been a little easier. We could have suffered a little less, but whatever. um, but yeah, so it's just been this amazing thing. I mean, even in the times before I was able to peel the onion, right? When I gave up on living in my use, right? I tried passing twice. And one time I left my body, right? And I saw myself laying on the bed and I was like, oh wow, I'm dying. I was like, this is real. This is really real. And I was like, I'm not ready for this. I'm not done, you know? And I didn't know what it was because 5 minutes before I was completely done, you know? But it was just this feeling. And then, you know, that universal thing happens. My brother happened to slam my door into my room, walking into my room, and I shot back into my body. And I ended up in the hospital that day. So my life was in that way. And then another time I, you know, ate a bottle of sleeping pills and shot a bundle of dope and woke up 2 days later in my own like self. And like it's just bizarre, right? Like what are these things meant to teach us, right? And so my story, as weird and bizarre as it can be, right, I believe we all have this soul mission, right? And it's this veil can be as thick or as thin as we want, right? And I can like adhere as much to as what I thought life would be for me, and every differentiation from that could be so painful, or I could just surrender and view this as the story of the continuation of my soul and figuring out what that really means. So super grateful to be here to share my experience.
Wow, thank you so much. I mean, I know a bit about you already, and so there's a couple of things that I think I would like to introduce to our community a little bit. But there was a couple of things that you said that I wrote down, and one of the main ones is finding soul lessons in pain. Finding a lesson in discomfort. Now that's a practice. That doesn't just like come to us automatically, right? That's something that we have to actually consciously make the decision to do. Even like in my present moments, you know, like where something uncomfortable is happening or I'm presented with a personality that I don't necessarily like, I have to make the conscious decision to say, this person is a reflection of you. What are you not looking at within yourself? Why are you seeing this reflection in another person? And it is annoying. But okay, so you talked about somatic release as well. And I think something that comes up when I get to talk to somebody who has such like a richly contrasted experience is about, do you think that we have to go through pain in order to come into spiritual awareness? Let's say that you're a person who's just having kind of a regular life, and you don't have to deal with addiction or grief or depravity or like whatever, you know, the other kind of contrasted experiences are. What do you say to somebody like that's not ever going to experience that deep dark contrast? How do they get to a place of spiritual acceptance?
Um, yeah, it's just about like the soul's mission in this lifetime, right? Like I've witnessed those people before on my path, right? And it's interesting to me at points, right? There's this comparison all the time. It can be, I've seen people almost make it like things that weren't, I don't know, actually, like I don't think people have to go through pain. To answer your question, I don't think people have to go through pain to be able to experience spiritual wellness or spiritual, yeah, like whatever it is, enlightenment. So, yeah, I mean, I sit with a medicine called Kambo, and so it's kind of like that. I feel like has been a really great platform for me to be able to get comfortable with the discomfort and find the healing behind it. Because quite literally, the medicine is like a physical medicine that makes one feel a little like quite uncomfortable, depending on the person. And it's, you know, only 20 minutes long, but it removes a lot of toxins from the body, a lot of old bile and old thought patterns and old energy. And there's a lot of scientific studies that, you know, big pharma is trying to get their hands on this, but they can't because it's nature's medicine. And anyway, it's definitely a practice. No, people don't have to suffer. No.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on the aspect of your life that I'm aware of that I think would be beneficial for our communities, maybe to learn a little bit about, and that's your journey with different medicines in your soul healing process that you've gone through. And yeah, I just want to give you maybe a little bit of space to share, like you have so much knowledge around it, and I think that this is a nice opportunity to share about it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thank you for that. You know, I mean, I'm not indigenous. I don't really have like the complete right to, like, you know, talk on this, but I will speak on my experience, right? Because I'm allowed to speak about my experience. I do believe that. So yeah, I came to the medicines, the iboga, the ibogaine specifically. There is a difference. One of them is like a synthesized version of the plant iboga, that's ibogaine, and that's what they gave to me in the hospital. It's just this very unassuming pill, and you know, I took it and I asked for more, and they were like, no, 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 you just wait. And oh, I experienced many things. It's 36 hours about, you know, like intensive stuff, and then like 48 hours just in whole of just being in the space. And what it is it is marketed in places where it's legal, as an addiction interrupter. It's not for everybody. There's definitely contraindications within the health, like the physical realm. So it's, if anybody does want to seek it out, make sure it's a clinic that, you know, does those checks before one goes in. It's a heavy medicine. Physically, it's on the heart, it's dehydrating. So I had to be hooked up to a heart monitor and IV drip of saline, and just to get to the meat of it though, right? Like, it took me through my life before, during, and after my experiences in awareness and memory. And it also brought me to just a lot of knowledge about the universe. There's other medicines like ayahuasca that maybe people know a little bit more about, a little bit more mainstream these days. And it's known as the grandmother. So iboga is known as the stern father. So takes you through your life and it's like, this is a waste of time, get rid of this, nope, nope, nope. And so it also like wipes the serotonin and the dopamine clean in the brain, and it increases the plasticity of the brain as well. So for months afterwards, that's where the person is able to have that elongated, and it removes, for most people, for some people after a flood dose, which is a high dose, it removes withdrawals. So that, all of that combined, right, that plasticity, it gives people like those 2 months after that dose of that flood dose of just being able to, and I mean, I've seen people not be able to sleep for a month afterwards just because of the energy of the medicine itself. It's like, and it sounds like the whole jungle is buzzing in your ears and can't quite like stand up straight. I was lying down for the whole thing in another dimension. So that was a really helpful one. And the one that they took us to afterwards was the 5-MeO, or also known as bufo. The naturally occurring comes from the Bufo olivaris toad. It's out in the desert, in the Sahara Desert, and it's not really highly encouraged for people to go out and find this medicine themselves because the toads are very sensitive and they're endangered. There's a synthetic version called 5-MeO, and being in this clinical setting, they gave us all, synthetic versions. So I took the Ibogaine and the 5-MeO, and it was seeing the universe, and then on the in the outside, and then seeing the universe was the Ibogaine, and then seeing the universe within was the 5-MeO, and experiencing all of the different communities and ecosystems within my own body, not only on a biological level, but like on a spiritual level too. And it just like blew that out of the water for me. Kambo, these two are psychedelic. Kambo is not a psychedelic medicine. It is a physical medicine. And that came into my awareness like less than a month after that, like a couple weeks after the two experiences I just spoke about. And in addiction, God bless somebody who doesn't experience withdrawal and addiction, but I would say 90% of my addiction was in withdrawal. And so there was a lot of vomiting, a lot of sweating, a lot of diarrhea, just the worst possible experience one could have physically. A flu, it's a flu. Like imagine like a 6-year-long flu. And so this Kambo medicine, it comes from the Medusa bicolor frog, which is a frog in the Amazonian rainforest, and it's used by the indigenous people. I want to backtrack and talk about Aboga's indigenous root, but now I'm on the Kambo, so I'll just focus. It's used. It was brought to the tribes people's attention through the ayahuasca. The lore behind it, the story behind it is Chief Kampu had a village, a community that was very sick, and he was trying to heal them. Nothing he could finish, nothing he could figure out was working. And he drank the ayahuasca with intention to find an answer to heal his village. And she showed him the frog and how to apply it. And then they started applying it, and then the Western people started hearing about it. Peter Gorman was the first one to bring it up in the 1950s, 60s or so. And there's been a lot of healing for people. It brings on a beautiful sense of clarity. It's used to clear the panema, the bad luck, the bad energy. It's used to increase their ability to hunt well, right? So if you translate that, like that's their food, that's their wellness, that's everything to them. So if you translate that to like our lives, right, like how we can relate and recognize that, is like our wellness in every way, right? Like how do we eat in every way? And that's how the Kambo has really helped me. Yeah, and you could go on, there's more, yeah, but
Thank you. The reason why I wanted to talk about this a little bit is just because it's information. Like it doesn't mean that you should do something or you shouldn't do something or whatever. It's just like this is the information that's out there. Whenever I hear stories about how people discovered these plants that are truly medicine in the world, it's always the most mystical, magical story. Like, how could you come to this? Graham Hancock has a great TED Talk where he talks about the roots of ayahuasca and how the indigenous people came to find the vine that would activate the ayahuasca. And they said that the star people told them where to find this one specific vine out of tens of thousands of vines. And, like just that story alone, I'm like, okay, there's something bigger at play. And so, yeah, it's crazy, right? So one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, you had mystical experiences that were brought on by medicines. And I want to hear about your answer to the validity of them. Like, do you feel like they're any less valid because they were brought on by some sort of medicine?
No. Yeah, no, I don't think so, right? Because I wasn't I wasn't meant to experience it in any other way. And it's just what was meant for me. And I think that if anything, it helps my ability to verify its strengths, because it gave me a platform to really dive into that rather than it come flooding forward for me, which would have been far more confusing, I feel like. And yeah, it's definitely been a blessing for me. I don't think it's any less valid. Yeah,
I love that.
because
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you for that reflection. I mean, because it's definitely something that comes up. You know, people say, like, oh, well, it's drugs, or even when it comes to near-death experiences, you always get a lot of naysayers that, like, oh, well, the brain is dying, and so that's just what happens when the brain dies. But, you know, we're all having these mirrored experiences, whether they're brought on by plant medicine, or a death experience, or an outer body experience, or deep in meditation, or whatever the way that it comes. And I love the way that you framed it. This is the way that you were meant to experience it. And I feel like we all have ways that we're meant to experience things. And I love that framing of it. But, you know, regardless of how we experience them, they are all mirrored. Like, we all have sort of the same experience. We all go to the same spaces. We all see the same things. And it might vary in degree, but there's just so many similarities. It's impossible to say that we're not entering like the true spiritual realm.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just full compassion for the people that like aren't ready to experience that buoyancy in their life and their spirit. If you know, that's just the way I kind of feel about it. Um, and it's like, okay, right, like I wish you the best of luck in finding that in your own way, because yeah, it's an important time, I feel like, in the world. And it's been an interesting like experience for me over the past 7 years, kind of watching this earth that we all live on go through so much, and people really start to realize what's happening. And you know, I lost my train of thought, the connection I was making in that. But my point is, oh, because it's yeah, like the fact that they aren't ready to see it, like maybe they're scared. I was scared, you know, that's okay. Doesn't mean
Yeah,
my experience is any less valid than theirs.
right. Do you think that everyone will have a spiritual awakening in their lifetime, or this lifetime, this time that we're in now?
No, not particularly.
So I want to, you brought something up that is something else that I'd kind of like to hear you talk about, because I know a couple of the things that you're passionate about, but I would love to hear about your relationship with nature as your spiritual process has unfolded.
Definitely. One of my favorite things to think about was in the beginning of my sobriety, I was all over the place, you know, just physically on that day. I had my headphones in, I was sweating, I was doing farm work, and we were supposed to be taking weeds out of the ground or something, and I had a wheelbarrow. And so I was rushing around, and I rushed over this little beet plant. And mind you, I had no idea, right, that I was rushing over this beet plant. Had my music on, I was sweating, I was hot. It's Southern California, right? But I heard this energy. I felt this energy, like this like cry out. This like, oh, you know, and I turned around and my wheelbarrow had gone over this baby beet plant. And I was just like floored, because I'm telling you, my lack of groundedness and awareness in that moment was so intense. And to be brought back by something that I had no ability to hear, you know, um, it really like struck this chord in me where it was like, okay, like this is real, right? And even before I got sober, right, like I was blessed to have a family that moved from Queens, New York to suburbia when I was 2 years old. And so I always had a yard. And amid the times of like my family fighting or whatever was going on at my home, I could just go outside and watch the moss on the rocks flow as the river went over it. It was a tiny stream, not a river. But that right there, just that fluidity, that passing, right? And even in the moments like in my sobriety, in my spiritual journey, however we say, right? Like where just that connection to nature. There's this one experience, right, where it was that day, Betty, that we didn't experience it together, but we experienced the same thing. It was that day. And I got dosed on like 10 hits of LSD against my consent, and I was out of my head. Just was not ready for that. And everything felt like it was falling apart, right? My whole everything. But there was the sunrise or the sunset, I forget it once. Time is non-existent at that point. So, but I just remember watching the sunrise and the sunset, and I was sitting on this chair, this hiking chair, right? It folds out, it's comfy, you can kind of sit sideways on it. And I had my hand on the ground, and I was just watching the sunset, whatever, and thinking, wow, like, because my cousin was in the ground at that point. I was like, like, she's in here. Even though she's not literally underneath, like, where I'm sitting, like, she's in here. And, like, the earth is in here, and all this love is in here, right? And, like, the sun is right here. And that's all that matters. And, of course, when I, took a lot of work to really, like, integrate that. Right. And so that was a really beautiful experience for me, and coming more intimate with nature, right? And even further on, having the experience of like growing gourmet mushrooms, right? Like being able to connect with such a beautiful energy, and being able to not only like witness that strength, but also that fragility, and that knowledge, and that chance, right? Because even with the same mushroom, right, you could have a genetic mutation and something looks so different, and it's like it's so freeing, right? Looking at nature in all these different ways, right? It's like, okay, we have like these laws of physics and like these laws of this and that and whatever, but the thing is there's still so much variation in it. And like that's where like the magic happens. I feel like we try so hard to like make sense of everything, and that's a great foundation, but then where all the magic comes in, right? There's this cave in Northern California that has these crystals that come out of the wall in like curlicues and like different shapes. And these crystals are so fragile that water or a finger or the wrong amount of anything will crack it and dissolve it. But for some reason, the water in that cave during that time of formation was able to create such a space, right, for these crystals to grow, and in such a unique form that there's only all the caves in all the world, I think only 5% of them have a handful of these in there. And yeah, I love nature.
Oh my goodness, I love you so much. I love like, yeah, like I shared before, we have so many parallels. We're not the same personality, we're not the same person, but we have so many parallels, and your ability to see life through the lens that you do, I find it so admirable. And I love witnessing your journey and like being a piece of it with each other. I also felt that same excitement when I shared about like our parallels and finding each other, because that's really been such a huge part of my own spiritual journey, is finding my people. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're in each other's life all day, every day. It means that we have these little moments of intersection with each other, And it's that remembrance that, oh yeah, we planned this out before, to find
Yeah.
each other and to affirm each other and to not feel alone. And I get that so much with you. Like, I'm covered in goosebumps right now. I'm so grateful for your willingness to come and chat today and to share this really vulnerable, authentic piece of yourself and to stand in your spiritual truth and to share your knowledge with us. And I'm just so grateful. I just want to see if there's anything else that you'd like to share to feel more complete about our time together.
Well, I'll just reflect that back to you, Betty. I mean, like, you witness me and I witness you in your growth and your experience. And it's just like, it's such an honor and it's such an inspiration to see you speak your truth, and like, just keep standing in your power, right? And it's such an inspiration to just keep on, for me, like, fighting that good fight and walking that walk, right? And to talk the talk, let myself do that, so thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I really appreciate it. And you just have such a beautiful soul, and there's so much everything that, goosebumps. Yeah, all love and oneness.
Love you so much. Okay, guys, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Be wavy.